Hi, and thank you for being here with me today. I got myself a mic, and hopefully this makes a big difference. If it doesn't, I'm just going to quit and give up. I'm just kidding. I'm not really going to, but I feel like I learned a lot in the last recordings and realizing how much actually shows up in the audio. And so I hope that this is much, much better and you can hear me clearly. And if not, just please continue to bear with me because I am trying my best. All right, with that being said, today I want to talk about what not to expect in therapy. Like, what should therapy not be like? Because we talk a lot, or I've talked a lot about what to expect in your intake, like how you prepare as a therapist, how the client prepares, why we ask the questions that we ask, and things like that. But really, the question now is, what should I not expect, or what should not be happening in therapy? I want to start off by saying that therapy is not a quick fix. Sometimes I think that people, they have a session 2, 3 of therapy and they think, okay, like I talked about it and now I should be able to move on. Or sometimes they think that therapy works overnight, like you only need it for a month or two, but that's not usually the case. Of course, there's certain situations where maybe that is the case. Like, I don't know, you might go to therapy for a couple months if, you're just processing through something and you feel like you really got the hang of it. But ultimately, I don't see very often people just going for a month or two if they're really trying to work out things that are going on in their life. And I think sometimes there's a misconception that because you're going to therapy, like you're just going to feel better in a month or two. And in reality, you might actually feel worse in the beginning. And I tell my clients this because when you go to therapy, you're opening up about things that have really hurt you in life or a situation that's hurtful. Like, there's a reason why you're going to therapy or you're trying to process something. For a lot of people, it could actually bring up a lot of trauma that they weren't even expecting to talk about. Like, you might come in and talk about how your marriage is falling apart, but then it ends up leading to things that happened in your childhood and why you're so defensive or protective or always have your guard up, or why you want love so badly that you just put up with things that you shouldn't. And it might end up, you might think it's a problem like in the now in your marriage, but you end up going back 20, 30 years from now and you realize that there's a lot more to it. It's bringing up a lot of old memories. And we always talk about like therapy, oh my God, like it's so great for your mental health. And it is, but don't forget that there are parts to it where you're talking about uncomfortable things and maybe talking about things that you've been avoiding for a long time. So don't expect an overnight fix and don't expect it to happen, like, even if it's not overnight, don't expect it in a month or two. The other thing that I think is important to say is that therapy alone, like just showing up for your 1 hour session a week or every other week, is not going to fix the problem. You really have to be committed to making your own changes. So usually what I tell my clients is, we're here, we're talking for this hour, but when you leave this session or this room, for me it's virtual, but whatever, if once you leave this room, if you just kind of forget about the conversation, move on and continue to behave the way you've been behaving or making the decisions you've been making or in the habits that you're having, like, this 1 hour session isn't going to fix you. And I think sometimes people think they're coming to therapy to be fixed and somebody's just going to give them some magic solution. And that's not the case. Like, you have to leave session and be willing to put things into action. So for example, if we're in session and we're talking about, let's say, anger, like anger outbursts, really reactive person, if you're processing why you're like that in therapy and we're coming up with all these solutions and we're talking about all these things, it gives you insight. But then if you don't do anything with that insight, like you leave session and you continue to be reactive, you're not going to see the changes that you want. You have to leave session, and the next time something comes up for you that causes that anger or that reactive outburst, you need to be able to say like, oh, okay, this is what Carissa and I talked about, or this is what me and my therapist talked about, and things like that. You need to make sure that you're doing your work because the therapist can't do it all by themselves. And if we do it all by ourselves, it's just going to make the process so much longer, and you're going to see better results if you are putting in the work, even when you're not in session or not with your therapist. The third thing that I would say that should not be happening in session is therapists should not be talking about their own issues or using your time and space for themselves. So for example, if somebody comes to session and they're talking about having a sick family member, and let's say I have a sick family member, I should not be in session like, oh yeah, I totally get how that feels because so-and-so is sick in my family and this happens, this is how I respond. Like, that should not be happening. And some people, they'll give you a little bit of information, they'll disclose something personal, but usually it's for a purpose and it should be very small. Like somebody might say, you know what, I understand that that's really difficult. I've been through something similar. And, maybe they'll want to say, this is what I learned from it, to help you maybe see the other side or a different perspective. But really, it shouldn't be something consistent. You shouldn't get that many details to it. And if they are disclosing something, it should have a purpose. And your time in therapy should not be time for your therapist to talk about their issues or concerns or perspectives or like their own personal stories. Of course, they can give you advice, or they could say, oh, from what I'm hearing you say, maybe this or that, and like give you suggestions and try to help you along. But it should not be, oh, well, my husband does this and that, or my this, like it, I get anxiety and it makes me feel this way. Like, no, it shouldn't be about the therapist. It's your session. It's your concerns. It's your issues that you're putting on the table, and it's all about you. With that being said, you also should not expect your therapist to be your friend. And this comes up, like I've had clients who, let's say we're around the same age, or like, they get close to you and they'll make comments like, oh, I wish we could hang out outside of here. I wish I could talk to you more. Or, you seem so cool. Like it would be good to have a friend like you, or, some of these comments, and they're innocent and that's fine. But a therapist can't be your friend, because it just blurs so many boundaries and lines, and it makes something professional not professional anymore, and it's not personal. Like I have some clients that I think are cool, and if we had met in real life, like I would be their friend, but we didn't meet in that way, and they are my client and I'm not able to become friends with them, and that's just the way it is. So if you have a therapist who is like calling and texting a lot outside of sessions, or you meet up in a personal way, like, I don't know, you go out and get lunch together or get a drink together, like that's not professional. Obviously they can call you outside of session if they have to reschedule or question about billing, or, like something that's related to the business. But other than that, they shouldn't be, oh, hey, I just thought about you and wanted to call and check in and see how you're doing. And no, that's not how that goes. It's also really important that you don't have any judgment from your therapist. Now, of course, we're human, so I'm not going to say that a client never said anything and I was like, what did you just say? Sometimes that happens. Like, I'm human, I have reactions, but there should be no judgment. Therapy is a place where you're supposed to come exactly who you are, show up who you are, put on the table what you need to put on the table, because we're here to help you process through all of it. And so if you have to hide parts of you, I'm never really going to be able to help you, because if I'm making you feel embarrassed or judged, this space is no longer helping you make the process or progress that you need to make, because you can't be honest about how you're feeling. Your therapist shouldn't be saying things like, oh my God, why did you do that? Wait, what? What's wrong with you? Like, what did you do? Oh, I would never do that. Those type of reactions are very unnecessary. Again, people are human. If they have that reaction once and it's like, okay, they were human, that's fine. But you need to reevaluate if it's the right therapist for you and maybe consider somebody else. You also don't want unsolicited advice. Sometimes people just need to be heard, and I think there's a time and place for a therapist to give their opinion, and usually that's established within the dynamic. I know clients who they want my advice and they'll tell me like, well, what do you think about that? Or, do you think that I'm seeing this the right way? Things like that, and it opens up that type of conversation. But if somebody is telling me an experience, and let's say it was a really traumatic experience and they're rehashing these memories, I really shouldn't be going in there and stopping them and saying, okay, wait, what you just said is this, this, and that. And so if you often find that they're always just like telling you what to do or how to do it, when to do it, they're cutting you off, giving you advice in a moment that you weren't asking for advice, you need to think about that dynamic. And I want to say some of these things you can fix. Like if a client said, you know what, I really didn't want your advice in that moment, I just wanted somebody to listen to me. Okay, that's fine. Now I know better. So I wouldn't say just like get rid of the therapist unless if you really think it's not a good match. But if there are some things that they're doing that just seem off, I would really encourage you to have that conversation. So here's an example. I had a client who came to me who was really struggling with some like dating in his life, some relationship issues, and he had left his previous therapist because that therapist just kept telling him, like, just get on dating apps. Like, there's so many options on dating apps. If you put yourself out there and you get on an app, you'll eventually find somebody and you'll weed through all the bad ones. And he really didn't like the idea that the therapist was just telling him, hey, go on this dating app and figure it out and you'll get through it, because he wasn't looking for that solution. He was looking for somebody to sit down and talk about why he struggles with relationships, why he struggles with having the confidence to talk to somebody. And the last thing I'm going to say, because there's so many things, but the last thing I'm going to say for this video, so it's not too long, is that your therapist should not be distracted. Even if you're not in person and you're sitting on the screen like this with me, I shouldn't be on my phone paying attention to other things, texting. Oh, I shouldn't say, oh my God, I have a phone call. Hold on. No. You know, again, it's your time, it's your space, you pay for this, it's your money. It takes a lot to show up to therapy and pour your heart out to somebody or let your walls down and all of these things. So at no point should you feel like you are not the priority. Now, if there's an emergency in my life and I might come to session and say, hey, I'm waiting on this really important phone call from a doctor or something, I don't know. And I might give you the heads up, like, hey, if I need to take it, I'm going to take it for a minute and then I'll get right back to you. If that happens once, that's fine. But if you have somebody who it seems like they're texting, or it seems like they're taking phone calls, or they're talking to you, but they're looking over here and, you know, I'm answering my emails, like that's not okay. You know, we get really caught up in technology and how easy everybody can access us, but that does not mean that that should be happening in your session. So if it is happening, speak up or find another therapist if that is the solution for you. I went over, I don't even know how many, I didn't pay attention to how many, but I don't think that's like the extensive list, but I think that's something that is common. So just kind of helpful for you to think about when you're starting your therapy journey, or if you're in your therapy journey and you're realizing that some things aren't sitting well with you, it is okay to start over or express yourself and say, I don't like the way that this is going, or whatever the case may be. I hope that this mic helped a lot, because I'm actually going to record some other videos. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in my next video.